Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. Hello everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the In All Things podcast. My name is Mitch Frost. I'm here with Pastor Steve Markle, and today, if you're watching, you already know this, but we have a special guest. There's a third at the table. Welcome, Anthony Rex. How's it going?
Hey man, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited that you're here. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm good. Yeah.
I have to go back and forth. It's been a while since I've had to do this.
Yes,
but
you can do this.
Well, welcome. Thanks for taking some of your time to be here with us. Why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, what you do, and how you ended up at this table with us.
Yeah, thank you. So, my name's Anthony. I've been in ministry for about 20 years, and last year launched a nonprofit ministry with one of my closest friends, actually the guy that brought me to Christ, called BE1MAKE1, and it exists to empower the disciple-making purpose that lives inside of every person. And so our goal is really founded on two big things. One is that there should be a deep, deep joy in Christianity, and that is found in disciple-making, sharing Christ with others, and then growing in Christ with people. And then we just truly believe that, as we're seeing some of the challenges in Christianity, especially in our churches in America, that the problem is not a contemporary or traditional problem. The problem is really a mission problem. Like a lot of our churches have lost that really disciple-making mission. So we're trying to help as best we can in that.
That's awesome. I'm trying to think of the first time I met Anthony. When was the first time you met him?
We met years ago at a pastor's meeting in town, and then just through the circumstances of you going into this nonprofit and doing that, you and your family were kind of looking for a church to get planted in?
And we probably came across when we were talking about maybe some of the school ministry stuff and got to know each other. And I think that got that motor going.
Yeah, but so excited that you're here and that your family's involved. And I think it'd be good to just make a mention about this last weekend while we're at this point, because you have a daughter in the student ministry and a niece, right? And they both were part of Strongholds.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that?
It's kind of interesting to bring that up because, I'm a student pastor, and then we have the lead pastor who kind of allowed this event to happen at the church, right? And then we have, a father, parent of students that were involved in it. And so, for those of you listening or watching that don't know about that, we put on one of our bigger events in our student ministry called Strongholds. Starts Friday night, goes till Sunday morning. We had a guest speaker here, spoke all weekend and spoke Sunday morning too this year, which was awesome. It's a time of worship. It's also a time of a lot of fun and not a lot of sleep. But it was amazing this year, and there's a lot of things that happened that, it's kind of hard to put words to. But especially kind of the ending on that Sunday morning. This happened last year too, but just having all the students in the service with the rest of the congregation, the church family, worshiping together, and then getting Cody to speak this year was just awesome. I feel like it just brought it home and allowed the whole church to feel like they were connected to the well, which was really cool and really special. But a lot of decisions were made by students, and I was telling Devi earlier, I got sent some screenshots this morning of girls cheering on your daughter and niece that wanted to get baptized and things like that. And it's just cool to have this type of special community with students. And one thing we're trying to push really hard right now is don't just let it be an emotional high of this type of weekend, but what can we do with how do we do that every day when we don't feel it? How do we do it when we're months away from an event like this? And man, I just can't wait till next year. No, we got to figure out how to ride the wave outside of the hype, if you will. So it was awesome. I don't know if you have anything to add to it. Your son was also involved in the weekend too, but what was it like for you that Sunday morning, having us kind of come in and a guest speaker that you hadn't heard before and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, as a former youth pastor, especially too, it's super emotional seeing that many. And I hope maybe we can even, David, throw this picture up as we're talking, the picture of all the students on the stage that you posted on social media, because that's overwhelming to see all the students and the leaders there and sitting in church together. I mean, we often say they're the church of the future. They're the church of now.
That's right.
It really is. And to see them and hear them talking and to watch them worshiping and kind of leading the church, it's just really, really cool. So many of our students are involved in ministry, and seeing a few that are getting baptized this weekend, it's overwhelming. Cody is a church planner in Murfreesboro, Tennessee that we support as a church, but we hadn't really had him here to speak before, so it was awesome for him to be able to speak, and then for us as a church to continue to support him. So really cool, and really proud of our student ministry and what you're doing and all the leaders you have that are serving. Man, it's crazy. I stopped by on Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
We're at Brian's house where the junior high boys were, and there's like 17 smelly boys. Oh, like if I had to spend the night there, I think I would have thrown up. It smelled so bad. I mean, I like, the socks. Good. It's like, keep your shoes on, please. Something. It was bad. But anyway, just the camaraderie there and hearing some kids share out loud, them like, wow, they're really going to.
There's two things that jump out to me about this event. One is it embodies this idea of modeling. So you don't just invite kids to a facility where they experience something and then they leave. You bring them into homes, and then you bring leaders into homes, and then other members are making food. And so there's a immersive like modeling concept to it, which I really appreciate because that's really how Christianity is transferred. Yeah, it's a modeled thing that you see lived out in somebody's life. So I appreciate that being a part of it. And the other thing is this idea that, these kids, like you said, how do we keep this going? One of my favorite lines is Satan is not afraid of our intensity. He's afraid of our consistency. That just like one moment doesn't scare him, but consistent. And so following up with Strongholds with, a pattern of, ministry to these kids and calling them to be involved is really like, you got to have these moments that push them and then these moments that grow them, and so that good rhythm is really important.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, like they're, back yesterday and today, they're back in school with all the things that the world is putting before them and all the things that Satan's tempting them with. So I am so glad you're thinking about that and talking about that, because it can't just be student ministry as event to event, right? Because it's a long time. And speaking of that, I mean, the other thing I shared at the end of the service in July, I mean, this is a little advertisement for student ministry, but hey, July 11th, that week, Monday to Friday, is Student Life Camp, which we did last year. And the big announcement was that somebody in the church has donated the money for every student to go free. Amazing. Like as many as we can take. So get the word out there and tell people about that, because that is life-changing.
Yeah, it's funny. When I announced that to the leaders, we did a dinner the night before Strongholds started to just kind of get ready and kind of pray over the weekend and everything. And I kind of told them that. And I just keep coming back to this point of like, it's easy to feel discouraged sometimes. We've all been in ministry. It's easy to feel like, in just going event to event and, okay, how do we keep this going? And then moments like that happen. And it's kind of just this moment for me to take a step back and go, okay, like God is here, like He's doing things and the door's opening. This money wouldn't be happening. These opportunities wouldn't be happening for students to go to camp for free if God wasn't involved in it, in my opinion. It's kind of a humbling moment for me. And then coming off a weekend like this, don't get me wrong, I slept all day yesterday. But today I'm like reflecting and I'm getting emotional because I'm starting to, oh my gosh, that happened. And that we had this moment, and I don't know, it's just really special.
That's really cool.
So,
and the way you do that, that's really encouraging is you've involved the church in youth ministry, that they're not like this siloed mini church that you are pastoring on your own. Right. That individual that offered to do that, that's their investment into young people. That might be the way they can, but that investment combined with your investment, combined with that camp's investment, come together to really the watering and sowing, and it'll bear fruit.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool.
Well, that was an awesome weekend.
We can talk about this all day.
We can keep going. But the reason why we brought you on today, we had talked about this for months. There was one meeting we had in your office, and we were like, "Oh, we got to have you on the podcast." But we just busy couple months, but we're here. We did it. But especially for me, I got a chance to be in your Refuel breakout session. So about a month ago, we had a pastors conference here at Sycamore called Refuel, all day event and different breakouts that happened throughout the day, and you led one of them. And after hearing that breakout session, I think I came to you and I was just like, we have to have him on the podcast to do exactly that. Like it was just, it was so good. And I think even for people not at that conference, anybody listening, if you want to learn how to be a faithful disciple maker and a disciple of Jesus. A lot of the things that you covered in that time, I think, is just vital. And so I'm excited for this conversation. So kind of what I'm thinking is you can just kind of talk through some of the different points that you made, some of the things that you're, weigh on your heart in that conversation, and we'll just kind of respond as he kind of goes through.
Yes, I'm hearing it for the first time.
All right, let's see what happens.
This will be good.
Feel free to cut if we need to.
We have not cut. We have not edited one podcast since we started, so it's not starting today.
Let's see what happens. Well, I give you guys full permission. Pause, interject, share what you're thinking, because I'm learning with you.
Sure.
I want to start by just saying this is not what we're going to talk about, an overly complicated thing, but it can feel that way. It feels a little overwhelming sometimes, but if you guys will indulge me just for a minute, I'll back up and give a little history context. Most coming to Christ conversion stories post-World War II up until about 1965-ish were usually my mom and dad went to Mr. and Mrs. Taylor's house, had dinner once a week, and studied the Bible and became Christians. And about the mid-'60s, the sociologists call it the Great Rebellion, the sexual revolution. There's a big rebellion against organized religion at that time. And a lot of church leaders in the late 60s, early 70s at that time really looked at the landscape and said, the only way we're going to reach people is to have big programs, charismatic speakers, and great worship, and attract the masses to our facility in hopes that they'll become Christians. We stopped actually entrusting individuals who aren't in professional ministry just to share who Jesus is. Before that, people believed they could share who Jesus was and, see people come to Christ that way. And so in response to that, we saw that great, a lot of church leaders became really CEOs of programs. And not necessarily pastoring and shepherding and really evangelists in their own life and training people. And so that's kind of a little backdrop. And as we see, I'm the oldest possible millennial there is. 1983 I was born. So when it's good, I claim it. When it's bad, I deny it, But my generation, I'm 39 years old and younger, really is not going to buy into just, I'm going to stick with church because my mom and dad did it. We got to understand why. And so that's sort of cultivating the soil of a lot of the stuff we're talking about. And so the breakout was called Equipping Disciple Makers. And one of the things we started out by just saying was you don't equip churches, you equip people. Organizationally, organizations don't make disciples, people do. So you had Strongholds. The concept of Strongholds, or the event, didn't disciple people. The people that you brought into that did that work. And so it's people. And this also tethers back to, Ephesians 4:12 says the role of the church leader is to equip saints for their ministry, not do it for them. And that word equip literally just means to mend what is broken and supply what is needed. So there's two sides of it. So we see ourselves as in church leadership as how do we help people mend what's broken in their life, but then supply them with what they need to be, active in whatever ministry God has called them to be involved in, where they're going to pour their lives out to. And so that's sort of the backdrop of what got that started. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that.
No, I was just wondering if so what got that started was the fact that the churches became just very shallow, maybe per se.
That's right, yeah.
A lot of people became believers because of dynamic speakers and dynamic programs, but there was no equipping being done. Very little equipping.
Yeah, you might say baptism was the finish line, not the beginning, right? Or the birth. And so and then what we asked from our people was support our programs, give financially, and attend our gatherings for the next 40 to 50 years. And what you found is that people felt a social obligation to stay involved in that because in those days it was still sort of socially demanded upon people to go to church. And that we've lost that. I mean, you all seen the charts, right?
We know.
Church memberships dropping off. And I say this to people, listen, the reason those charts are doing that is because for 30 or 40 years we've made church members, not disciples of Jesus. If you make a church member and it's no longer valuable socially to be a church member, you're going to lose people.
Yeah. And I think, my breakout was very generational based. And I think, it's more and more you're just seeing people are not raised in a house where that's a crux of their family or what they're supposed to do. We're no longer in that generation anymore.
And I don't think the average church member has a clue about how to disciple somebody else. And that's scary.
And it feels overwhelming to them.
Right.
Right.
Oh, it is overwhelming to them. And then it's really, when we think about it
Yep.
as leaders, it's overwhelming to us because it's like you feel like it's all on us.
That's right.
And it shouldn't be that way.
We sort of feed the vicious cycle to keep the thing going. And what I found, a couple of things to break the barriers down that I tell people is, you are already wired by God to be a disciple maker, and you already are one. Like, Steve, if I said, hey, what's the best Italian restaurant in Pickerington? You might tell me one.
We don't have any. No.
Okay. Olive Garden. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, that's across the line. Mezzo's is really good.
Oh, Mezzo is good. That's
Very
right.
good,
That's right. Or if I said, hey, my car is acting up, I need a mechanic.
Brian's Auto.
Brian.
There you go, Brian. Okay, Brian, yes. We're sponsored by Brian's Auto.
Yes, and Canes and Porters.
Yeah, that's right. But my point is, you are wired by God to share what you love with who you love.
Right.
So, like our organization, we call it BE1MAKE1. Literally, it starts with, when people think disciple making, they usually think 2 by 2, knocking on a stranger's door, giving them a Bible tract, and trying to have some awkward Bible study. And people are like, I'm not a vacuum salesman. I'm not into doing that. It's weird, you know?
Right.
But that's actually a complete misconception. You know, disciple making is helping seekers know Jesus, but helping followers become like Jesus. And so you and I having coffee on once a week and you helping me become a better husband is disciple making.
Right.
It's that simple.
And is it formal in your mind? Is it like we're going to do a study through this book together, or is it sometimes just doing life together, or is it both?
I think it has to start with informal and then at times meet opportunities to be formal. Okay. So you and I might not ask you to help me become a better dad or a better husband if I don't know and trust you.
Right.
So we got to do life together. You look in Jesus, he shared meals with his disciples before he shared mission with his disciples. Right. You know, and so in that relationship, we've got to build the bridge of love that can carry the weight of truth. You know, and so as you build that, and that's why churches that really zero in on, okay, we got to, if we're going to be bigger, we got to be smaller. We got to do small group ministries. Yes. We got to get people in these groups because it can't all rely upon you or you. Like the number of people that come to this place every weekend can't just simply to be dependent upon on you. Right. Right. And so getting back to this idea that you were wired to do this, the other thing that's interesting is it is the source of joy in your Christianity. Like, y'all watched the new Spider-Man movie that came out? Did you like it?
I loved it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what completes your joy is when you share that with somebody else.
Right.
Either with them as they watch it or telling them. That's actually completes the circuit of joy. So your walk of faith, if it starts to mean something to you and then you share that with somebody, whether they're Christian or non-Christian, that actually completes the circuit of joy. So the PR stuff we got to get over with our people is, number one, we're not asking you to do something unnatural. You're wired to do it.
Right.
Two is it's going to unlock joy.
Yeah, I don't think that some people have even ever experienced that joy, because there is no greater joy, I think, than to know that my children walk in truth. Who am I quoting?
That's right. 1 John 3.
1 John. Yeah.
No, yeah, 3 John. I'm sorry.
3 John. That's where it is. I know. I did a.
It's close.
I did. Going back to college, I did a whole commentary on the book of 3 John. That was like a big project for one class.
Is that published somewhere? Can we buy that?
Oh, there's hundreds of them that had that class, but. Yeah, but I just was thinking, though, about how when I see somebody who I have spent time with, who I've shared my faith with, who I've invited to church, when I see them get it and it clicks, or they're getting baptized, I can't hold my emotion in. Awesome. There's nothing greater than that. Yeah. Some people haven't tasted that, and that's not something that's reserved for pastors. It's for everybody.
Let me ask you guys. What do you think the barriers are? Like, what do people feel? Like, what fears do they feel? What apprehensions? What comes to your mind?
I think just feeling unqualified is so big. And I think especially the more that the church, Big C church, American church, becomes this idea that it's the pastor on stage and we show up to watch him and he's going to be great. And like the more that it becomes that, then the further that the congregation feels to, I could never do that.
That's right.
And
it's
so
professional.
I think that's a big thing in my opinion. And I see that in students. I see that really in everybody. It's just like, I could never speak that well, or I could never communicate the idea that I have in my heart and my mind. So I'm just not going to.
That's right.
Yeah. I think it's unqualified.
I think that I 100% agree. I think the idea, on a smaller sense, not in a way that everybody knows, but being canceled by your friends. The whole idea, I'm speaking this Sunday, starting a new series called Louder, and that our actions speak louder than words. But I'm talking about having honor in a cancel culture this week, and how we are, I think, fearful as Christians to say much because we might offend somebody.
That's right.
And I don't think we should be out there saying offensive things on purpose on social media. But when it comes to, hey, you're my friend and I want to talk to you about my faith, the fear that that person's going to think that I'm being too forward with my faith and they may not want to be my friend anymore. In essence, canceling me as a friend, I think that holds us back sometimes.
I see. Yes. It's so everyone is wired for community, but accountability is the bedrock of community. Like you actually, if I don't ever feel like I can tell you the truth and you never tell me the truth, in fact, the people I feel closest to are the ones who have occasionally punched me in the nose, you know, and knowing they love me, you know, that we built that trust and that relationship. And so you guys are, I think you're 100% right on this unqualified fear of what's going to happen. What if I make it awkward? What if I can't do this? And the reality is all you're called to do is share with what you do currently know. The two big questions of the Bible, right? God to Adam, where are you? God to Moses, what's in your hand? Right? Like, where are you and what do you have? Like, just share that.
I mean, Cody said something like that at the end of the message on Sunday. The whole idea of sharing the gospel, it's not our it's not our job to get them to convince them, to make them believe. Our responsibility is to share what God's done for us. And I think that old school thinking, and the way I grew up too, was presenting the gospel was all about getting to the point at the end and convincing that person, talking them into praying a prayer. Well, if they're not ready and they're not ready to receive it and give their heart to Christ, then it's not going to take. It's not going to be real. So there has to be, like you and I were just talking about baptism, like with our kids, like I've never pressured my children to be baptized. Let it be their decision, and then it takes, and they remember it, and it's something that was meaningful to them. But I think that that's one of the problems too.
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. Yeah.
And we've felt rejection at times, and it's overwhelming. And so, you know, based upon that sort of fear, that experience, that value, you know, results, actions, beliefs, all get down to values. That's what drives that. And at the end of the day, that's why we try to root back into, I think disciple making is not just like this idea of being a command, but it's also a powerful diagnostic. So for example, like if I'm just really apprehensive or unsure or insecure about that, the answer is not just force yourself. The answer is come back for a minute and just ask, what has God done for me? Where would I be right now in my life without him? What has Christ done for me? And as you cultivate that gratitude and that awareness, all of a sudden that there becomes like this word bank of things to share, you know, and opportunities to do that. So start with where you are and then move forward.
I also think too, you made a point earlier about how like it's kind of has to start informal before it sometimes might get formal, because how are you going to go to somebody and ask about, hey, how do I be a better parent, better this, better that, if I don't trust you and see the example from you? And I think that's actually foundational with God too, because sometimes I have to go back and say, okay, God, are you trustworthy? Are you good? Are you this? And then once I realize, oh, yes, he is all those things, then I'm more likely to go tell the people, right? So it's kind of that ground level, this is who God is. This is what he says about me. He's made me a disciple maker and all these things. And so now that I know all that, now I can go and share all that.
And what's so cool is like, guys, this should be the funnest thing we do in our life, being a Christian. Like Jesus promised fullness of joy, fullness of peace. And if we lay that like a transparency on top of our life, do we have fullness and joy and peace? And boy, we are stirred up, agitated, angry people, generically speaking. But that doesn't square with Jesus' promise. And so what we're talking about is not, when we say disciple making, I say it's not the 13th thing that God is asking you to do. You're already doing 12, now you got to do another. No, it is the thing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so I think sometimes it's like God is walking you into the deepest joy of being his.
I mean, not to go back to the Great Commission, but the whole verb usage and go into all the world is like as you were going. That's what it's Jesus is saying as you're going. And I think that we should think of discipleship as something that we do as we're going through every day of our lives. It's not let's mark that check that box in our lives this week. Did I disciple make this week? No, it's like all the time, right? With the people we're in a relationship with.
I think that's another big barrier for people too, is it's like, if I just have to add another thing to my to-do list, then I don't have time for that. I don't have energy for that. But it's like, if that becomes the motivator for all your other to-dos, then it changes things, you know?
If I say, well, who are the ones you're discipling in your life right now? You're like, but then like, well, who are you doing life with right now? Might be a better question.
Right.
And are you infusing that with, like the people that you're doing life with are those relationships spiritually intentional?
Right.
That's all it is.
Right.
And in those relationships, discipleship is just doing the one another's.
Right.
There's 59 of them in the New Testament. Just doing the one another's. You're
Right.
bearing each other's burdens, and you're encouraging each other, and you're, living out what it means to walk in faith each day together.
Yeah. And they might not even know that you're spiritually intentional with them at first.
That's right.
But it could become that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Another big thing that I know you're very passionate about, and you kind of touched on in your refill breakout, is identity.
That's right.
So I want you to talk on that for a moment, because I think that would be awesome to continue this conversation, kind of centered around identity and discipleship and how those fit together. So wherever you want to start.
I can't wait to talk a little bit about this with you, because I know it's passionate. It's a passion of yours as
Absolutely.
well. But one of the first things we work on, if you're going to equip disciple makers, you have to give them a disciple making identity. So, for example, Jesus comes into Caesarea Philippi, Matthew 16, and he says, "Who do people think that I am?" And you're this, you're that, John the Baptist and all that. And then he says, "Who do you think I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ." And this idea of he's the Christ, the Son of the living God, Jesus says, "On this rock I'll build my church," right? He says, "I will build my church," that phrase. And I ask people, like, when he said, "I will build my church," what picture did he have in mind? What was he thinking about? And that phrase, "I will build my church," the word is ecclesia.
Right.
And church actually comes from the German word kirk, K-I-R-K, which came from the Greek word kurios, which is Jesus is Lord. And it just meant, I'm owned by the Lord Jesus. That's not the word that Jesus used, actually. Ecclesia is the called out, the assembly, the gathered. And in that setting, Matthew 16, everyone standing there knew exactly what Jesus meant. His picture, when he said, "I will build my church," was not just a facility or a weekend assembly. His picture was that phrase ecclesia, Caesar had an ecclesia. It was borrowed from the Greek world 400 years before Christ. They had an ecclesia. It was like a city council. They voted on paving roads and going to war. And then Caesar borrowed that when they took over the world. And he would have, maybe 200 people or so that were trained in the Roman language, arts, music, culture, values, mission of Caesar. And when they would conquer a city like Philippi or Corinth, he would send his ecclesia in, live among these newly conquered people to assimilate them into Roman life, teach them how Romans live. So when Jesus said, "I'm going to build my ecclesia," that's the picture he had in mind. I'm going to be a king, and I'm going to have a people. I'm going to send them into newly conquered territories, people, to live with them, to show them my priorities, my language, my culture, my arts, my way of life. That was his picture. So identity, it's the question he asks is, how do we expect our people to view themselves? As an identity question when it comes to being a disciple maker, being a Christian, really, that idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
really, really good.
Yeah.
I love that. And so would you say that how would you define the identity that does come from God or from Jesus? Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people struggle with. I know this weekend a big emphasis we had was when you do step into a relationship with Jesus, it's no longer about you. So how do we balance this idea of it's not about me, and there's so many calls to deny myself and no longer live for me, but at the same time, what does that?
That's right.
Does that mean I'm nothing? Does that mean I'm like how do we
That's
kind
a
of
great
hold
question.
this?
And we're living that. We're balancing
that tension, I guess,
in the world of too, where we're all always emphasizing these personality tests, and that we're all created differently.
Right.
We're not going to be all pigeonholed into this. This is the disciple type you are. Like what? There's more than one way.
Here's the thing. I feel like over the last several years of my life, I'm learning and discovering and becoming different as well.
Right.
And so everywhere you look in our world, people are telling you how to identify who you are. Right? I mean, my daughter, she's almost 15 now. She's coming out of the Justice era, the clothing brand. But I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago when she was wearing that clothing, all the language on the clothing was about like, tell the world who you are. But the message of the world is look inside of yourself, discover what that is, and then pull it out and push it onto the world. That's how you define yourself and you're okay. Jesus, when he says deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me, die to yourself, all that stuff, he's not saying you lose your identity. He's saying you finally discover it. Colossians 3 says your life is hidden with God in Jesus Christ. One of my favorite phrases, this guy said one time, he said, "Do you think we'll know each other in heaven?" And the answer is, we won't actually know ourselves until we get to heaven.
Wow.
Meaning our true self. So what's going to happen at baptism, it's a perfect time to talk about baptism, by the way, which is all about identity. Who are you identifying with?
Right.
And baptism is a death. but it's a death to your old self. It's a death to the wrong self and a birth to the true you. And the rest of the journey is to discover who you really are. It's the parallel. You think about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt, but that's not who they were.
Right.
It took 40 years of wandering in the wilderness to like get them out of that mindset. That's not who you are, you know? And so that's really what a lot of that is like in Jesus Christ. He defines who I am. That's why he said, you know, if you when you deny yourself, you discover who you are. That's the real you.
That's
awesome.
good. Yeah.
Anything you want to add on that?
No, I think that's fantastic.
A follow-up question to that, this idea of discipleship and where to start and doing life with people and you know, not letting yourself feel disqualified and all these things. How do you? I think everybody's searching for their identity. I think everybody wants to know who they are. And so how does doing life with somebody potentially lead to a place of showing them who they are?
That's a great question.
I don't know if either one of you can weigh in on that, but you know, if we're really going to start to live this out, everybody listening, watching us at this table, how do we start to do life with people to a point where they get led to, oh, this is who I am, like this is my identity, and how do we kind of do that? What do you think? It's a big question.
It's rooted actually in creation. So when you were created, God said, I made you in my image.
Right.
You are made to mirror what you adore and worship. So if you adore and worship LeBron James, like you're probably going to dress like him, try to play basketball like you're going to mimic him, right? That's just natural. So the point of doing life together is that in community, we're like getting little pieces of mirrors back to us. That's why the Bible's so serious about being careful who you spend your time with, because you will reflect that and you'll mirror that. And so I say all that to say, like in our life of faith, if I'm around people who are pursuing Christ and passionate about God and bearing the fruit of the Spirit, I'm going to begin to mirror that.
Naturally, yeah.
And the problem we run into sometimes is we try to mimic people's gifts, not their passion. So I'm not Steve and I'm not Mitch, you know, but in that community, I might, you know, learn from Steve and see what he does well and want to become like him and aspire in some ways. And like over time in that community, I begin to discover who I am in Christ as I follow. Like Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Right.
It's a modeling thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it there. I think that then as we become a follower of Christ, though, that positionally being a child of God, I think that is a big thing, and understanding all that means presently, all that means in the future as an heir of his, and that there's such a peace and a comfort in that. And I think that knowing what that means is so important. And I think beyond that, then each of us, like you said it so well, we get shaped by the people that we're around. And so who we surround ourselves with as followers of Christ really helps us figure out more and more what it means to follow Christ. And I could go back and just name the different people in my life that have shaped me. And I'm 52 now. So I'm like, I feel like I know who I am more than I ever have in my life. Yet, you know, I was talking to my son last night, who's 28, and just about different people in his life that are about the same age as him that are still just trying to figure it out, you know? And it's like he's figured out a lot more, but sometimes it takes a lot longer. And then the younger generation, I think there's so much thrown at you and your age where I think it's harder. I think it's harder for you and teenagers today, to those that are younger, that are in your ministry, to figure this out. And there's so much pressure, right?
Well, and I would add to that, like, we've applied pressure to your generation to know already.
Yeah.
What if, like, our young people could just raise up going, it's okay that, like, the point of childhood is actually just to not have the burden of having the answer today.
Yes.
I mean, if I had to lock in who I was at 18, like, I'd be a hot mess.
Right.
You know, like, I didn't know. And if we're really honest with ourselves, this is the broken part of the world. If we're honest with ourselves, when I look inside of me, it's kind of like schizophrenic sometimes. You know, it's like, it's a mess. That's why I have to look to God. But then also in the community of people, having people in your life, you know, who can actually call you on stuff too. Like, hey, that's not who you are.
Right.
You know, to call you up, to challenge you, to grow you, to help you. Helping our young people, helping all of us, but helping young people see discovering who you are is a journey for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And if you take a deep breath, you're going to have a great time doing it.
Right.
But if you feel pressure
Yes.
to like become somebody so that who you are gets enough likes, follows, and whatever it may be, like the attention and affirmation of the world. You were made for attention and affirmation, just not from the world,
right?
From God.
Yeah. That's why hold on to what is true. What we do know is true is what the Word of God says about us.
Point.
What we don't know is all the things that the world is asking us.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? I mean, you're asking the questions, but
yeah, no, this is all super, super good. I think for me, whenever I think about identity, and especially the more you guys are talking, I'm thinking about it even more. It's kind of like I think we should live in this kind of tension. Man, that's kind of the word that I keep coming back to. Yeah. But we kind of live in this tension with identity of, okay, we are children of God, and the only reason why we're children of God is because we're paid for, right? That's a big part of our identity, is that we are paid for by the blood of Jesus. But at the same vein, we're also called to be holy, and we're called to be like Jesus, and we're called to be perfect as the Father is perfect. That's something He imparts with us. Right. So yes, we're paid for, but that's not an excuse to just do whatever we want, right? We're paid for, and that's the only reason why we're going to heaven, right? We're paid for. But we're also set on this trajectory of molding ourselves in the image of God, which means surrounding yourselves with people who are godly and are image bearers, so that we can kind of walk along towards this trajectory of becoming more like Him. So when I think of this idea of identity and who we are as disciple makers and children of God and images of God, like, we're paid for, but that doesn't mean it's an excuse to do whatever you want.
So,
in
1 John 3, he says, ultimately when Jesus returns, we're going to discover who we are. And he says in 1 John 3, we don't know what we're going to be like. We don't know, but we know we'll be like Him. And then he follows that with, behold, what manner of love God has given us, that we could be children of God. And then the very next verse is, whoever has this hope in Him purifies himself. Do you see that link? And so when you know how much you're loved, Mitch, you stop running to the world to define you, to give you affirmation, to tell you who you are, and you go, God. It fuels your sanctification. It's not permission to be unsanctified. So true acceptance of the gospel fuels sanctification, and what you're describing. It's so that's why, in ministry, you got to keep putting in front of people the powerful love of Jesus Christ that overwhelms you.
Right.
And that'll fuel you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I kind of want to end in this place of maybe some real applicable kind of landing steps for people listening of maybe we can even speak to the different place of if you feel like you're not pouring into anybody, if you feel like you're pouring into a lot of people, if nobody's pouring into you, maybe we can kind of touch on the different levels of this.
That's a great point.
But let's kind of leave the people with some real ways to start being disciple makers in their real life. So let's start with maybe the group of people that feels like there is just nobody that they're reaching right now. What would you guys say to people like that where do I start? Where do I begin? What would you say?
Regardless of what group, we start with develop a habit of cultivating gratitude for what God has done for you. Whether that's on a weekly basis, a daily basis, you got to cultivate that gratitude. And that's going to give you the substance of what you're going to share. Secondly, I think you ask God for community, and be willing to step into community. He wants that for you, and He'll make that available to you. And then when you pray for opportunities, Colossians 4 says, pray that a door will be opened to me, that I can speak, with wisdom into these opportunities. And so I would tell people just, have confidence that becoming a disciple maker, seeing yourself that way, not as another thing to do, but that's who you are, will lead to joy. Become convinced of that. Really dive deep into what God has done for you, and ask God for opportunities to step into community. And you'll be shocked. It's really what we need is the eyes to see, not the opportunities to be had. Right.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I would just add to that too. Listening to my wife was talking to my teenage son about Strongholds and about a friend of his that's just started to get involved, and he was just saying how surprised he was, but how excited he was that he was getting involved in church, and he wants to, do the right thing to be a good influence. And my wife went back to a Bible study we did years ago, Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. And she's like, Nick, this is where God's moving right now. Just join God in His work. And that was okay, this is the person that God put in your path right now. You didn't see it coming. It's awesome.
And take the pressure off yourself.
Right.
This is a zero pressure endeavor.
Yeah.
This isn't a conversion rate, close the deal.
Go door to door in your neighborhood, knock on 5 doors.
Jesus. That's awkward and weird.
No.
That's a great point.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think too, it's just start looking at the people that are right in front of you.
There you go.
This weekend, I know I keep going back to it, but it's fresh in my mind. Cody had every student and leader write down names of people on a poster board that need Jesus. And we had over 150 people written down on this poster board. Start with the people in your life, in your circle right now. Like, there are people, I promise. Pray for community, and I believe God's going to show you that too. But also just open your eyes and say, God, I know I cross paths with people, message people, text people, and see people that need this same message. So help me to see them in a new way, you know?
That's a great point.
Moving up the ladder a little bit. Let's talk about maybe some people who feel like they have one or two people that they're pouring into, that they're doing life with, but they don't know how to do it in a way that, like you said, is spiritually minded, that is really honoring God, or is really producing fruit of any kind. What would you say to those people?
So these people have community, but maybe it's not spiritually intentional community. Yeah. Okay, you got two options. One is find a new community that is already spiritually intentional. I would encourage you not to do that. Unless the community you're in is a negative community. Yeah. But I'm guessing you're talking about, I go get pizza once a week with my friends, or I go to church with, that kind of thing. Somebody's going to have the courage to break the ice.
Move the needle forward,
yeah. But let me suggest, like, don't make it, like, really awkward. And, hey, can you guys sign this covenant that we're going to start? Like, it can be as simple as, like, hey, can we all just start praying together once a week? And I thought maybe we could just this week, what's one thing that's heavy on your heart?
Right.
Once a week, let's just pray together.
Yeah.
Just introduce the spiritual disciplines into those relationships.
Yeah, I think that along that same line is, I know some people do that with friends. Hey, let's go out after church and discuss the sermon.
Yes.
What did you get out of it? What did you understand what he was saying when he said that?
Yep.
You know, that type of thing can be very, it's fresh and it's like easy, and it doesn't have to seem, it's maybe not seeming overly intentional, but it is, and then it leads.
Doesn't take a lot of prep either.
No.
So this does not mean I got to go like figure out how to write a sermon and sit down and like preach at somebody. It's just small investments.
Yeah. And that can lead to bigger. You don't have to say, let's go on Amazon and both buy the same book and we're going to read a chapter and get together and talk. That can work, but.
And like you said, like sometimes the big thing is like, oh, I don't know how to preach a sermon. I don't have time to prepare. And it's like, but if you're cultivating gratitude for God or knowledge of God in your heart, then it's already there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's going to come out if it's something you're passionate and care about and you really
just
get.
Naturally, like you're reading scripture in the morning, maybe like at some point you go, hey, I was reading this the other day. Exactly. This would hit me. They're very practical. There's a really great tool called Discovery Bible Study. It's 4 questions. You could do it. We could start right now. You get the text out, you read a text, and you ask 4 questions in a Bible study. It takes no leader, no prep. You go, what does this teach us about God? What does this teach us about people? What's something I can obey? What's something I can share? Right. And it's just a conversational, and so that's a practical tool. But one thing I would say also is really important. If you're in a community of people who probably share your faith, but it's not spiritually intentional yet, my guess is most of them want spiritually intentional relationships.
Yeah.
So
they're waiting for somebody to break the ice.
They are.
Yeah.
They're waiting for somebody to have the courage to go, let's pray together. My guess is they're not going to go, you big loser, why do you want to pray? This is weird. Right. Get out of here. Yeah. They're going to go, okay.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to walk into it.
Yeah. And I think you may be hitting on something too, saying that it should naturally flow out of your heart.
Yeah.
Like out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so if you're not full of the Lord, then you're probably not speaking. But if you're feeling like your conversations with your group isn't going anywhere spiritually, maybe it's because you're not going anywhere spiritually. Because if you really are, it will flow out.
Yeah. Last group, let's speak to for a minute, is the people that maybe are pouring into a lot of people, or they're leading a small group, they're leading a ministry, they're giving a lot, and they feel like they're not being discipled, or they don't feel like they're being led anywhere. How would we maybe speak to them and give them some steps to do with a conversation like this? Whoever wants to start.
Boy, that's a great question. You should always have a Paul and Timothy in your life.
Yeah.
Somebody who's mentoring you and somebody you're mentoring. I think that's essential, and every stage of your life, there's always somebody who could be challenging you, somebody who can help you grow. And the other thing I would say to those people as well is challenge yourself to look for somebody who's not a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's, you have everything it takes to share Jesus with somebody. Yeah. And moving into maybe marginal spaces that you don't exist, outside of just your safe comfort zone of your church group, right. I would challenge people in small groups. Put an empty chair in that circle when you guys Bible study, have Bible study, and pray over that empty chair. Who should be here that's not here? Get intentional about that, and you'll find that doing that, I think we'll have opportunities to share your faith, and then look for those people that can mentor you as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I agree. I think having those relationships in my life that are with outside the church are awesome, and I love those. I love that not every friend that I have is a Christ follower right now that goes to Sycamore Creek Church. I love that, and I think that challenges me. But I do think what you're saying too is that those that don't feel like they're being poured into, you need to seek out that. But you can also, and you may not find somebody that is your mentor, but that you're on the same level with. Like if you're a small group leader, hanging out with some other small group leaders. Yep. And we facilitate here, but so that at the church, so that people can have some camaraderie and learning from each other and growing from each other, investing in reading and books and podcasts that pour into you as well. There's ways. You just have to look for them.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts from anybody at the table? I feel like this is one of the best conversations we've had in a long time. So anybody have anything they want to add before we kind of wrap this episode up? You guys good?
Hey, thanks for the time. I just the prayer is that God would move in us to make this the thing, the way that we live in and out our faith. Not just things to do, but the way we approach thinking about church, thinking about our life, thinking about faith is I want to share Jesus with people, whether they know Christ or don't know Christ, to help them become Christians or grow in Christ.
I love that. I really appreciate you being with us. And I think one of the big shifts over the years has been, in a good way, toward that evangelism and discipleship are not two different things.
There you go.
And I hate it. Like the way I learned it growing up is like, well, we evangelize and then eventually we disciple them. That's like, right. No, be one, make one. That's like, it's all one. It all goes together. Right. And I love that. And so I appreciate that. And I'm glad that that's the way the church is moving and understanding it. It's a process. Now, salvation is a point of belief, and baptism is that step. It's not the end, like you said. It's the beginning. Amen. And I'm super excited about seeing people get baptized. Your daughter and niece, and among others that are going to be baptized this Sunday. That's where it's all about, and seeing the progress in their life of becoming fully devoted followers. So, yeah. Amen. What's your closing thought, sir?
I have none. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening or watching today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you disagreed, let us know. We would love to have a follow-up conversation just to expound upon these thoughts. But don't stay neutral. Apply these things to your lives and live them out, because otherwise this was a waste of time, right? We want to take this into action and live this out. So please do so. And let us know what you want to hear from us. Anybody you think we should have on, or ideas or questions we should wrestle with, we would love to do that. But I think that's it. So thank you so much, sir. And we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.